Hi, I'm Corey Baldwin.
And I'm Dan Searle. We're back with a new Off the Beaten Path, a podcast for coaches who are living in obscurity, working in obscurity, trying to find their way all the way through obscurity, and even those who have made it out of obscurity.
It's a place for storytelling, learning, connecting, reconnecting, food for thought, and my favorite part, food for the belly.
Oh, yeah. The griddle's out. What are you cooking this morning?
The breakfast was good this morning.
I bet it was. What were you jamming with at the same time? Corey's always cooking on the griddle and jamming to 80s, 90s rap, or what was on the playlist today, Corey?
I actually went a little Toby Mac today, went a little Christian rap today, and had it was pretty good. We had I made my own version of McMuffins.
That's what we do at the house too. Were you the city on the hill? What were you listening to there with Toby Mac?
I'm trying to remember what was on there. I'm not even sure, but it was Toby Mac. I don't remember. We were jamming.
And in the meantime, our guests today, patiently waiting, are bobbing and weaving and winding path really is embodied by our guest today, Coach Randy Lee. So, Coach, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining us. Can't wait to hear your stories, man.
Well, thank you guys for what you do. Obviously, Coach Baldwin and you, Dan, what you're bringing for the young audience and older guys to reminisce about some of the great times they had in life. So I appreciate you guys.
Great times you have in life and still having for that matter, but those memories and going back and those moments that we all lived through basketball is what is a lot of what this is about. You're right. So Coach Randy Lee, before we go back in time, tell us where you are now. Looks like a beautiful summer day and what you're doing. So put us in context before we go back in your history.
Currently, I'm the head basketball coach at the Vanguard School. It's a small boarding school in Lake Wales, Florida. We have international students. If there's any international kids out there, we still have some spots. Also helping out as assistant at Southeastern University, and then doing some entrepreneurial work within coaching and education.
Many hats, like any good coach. There you go. We had Gordon Gibbons on, and he's talking about coaching a high school varsity and USBL team all at the same time and having a kid.
It's definitely.
That explains Jay and Holly's life right there. All right, Randy, let's jump into this thing, okay? Walk us through. You have a lot of ties with Coach G, we know, and with Lakeland and Florida Southern. So kind of walk us through the early paths, and then we'll get into how you jumped around in this crazy world of basketball coaching.
All right. I think a lot of what I've become, I've got tied to my parents, so I'm going to blame them good and bad. My dad he's a basketball junkie, hoop junkie, so I grew up around that aspect. He attended Florida Southern, was on the team, did not play, but was on the team there, eventually coached freshman basketball, and then coached at Lake Wales for a year, and then got out of the coaching business, but always was ingrained with Southern. So growing up, went to a lot of Florida Southern practices early on, and I'm probably the young kid that knew I'm not as good as the other kids long term. So I started looking at the game from long-term perspective fairly early. I don't know what that says about my confidence, but that's
Corey's path too, right?
Well, Corey became a college hooper. I didn't make it that far, so it's one of those where want to get involved. Loved what coaches were able to do with players. Saw success from the discipline. Dr. Hal Whistle was the coach then at Florida Southern, and then through the years with Coach Schultz, and then later on with Coach Gibbons coming in there, and then those are major influences to me, both my family and that Florida Southern background.
And you attended a lot of their camps and stuff as well?
Oh, yeah. I grew up as a Southern camper. I was a sweat hog back in the day, wiping the court down during the games. And, I think that part was big, just being around the players at an early age, just seeing the camaraderie. And they took me in, as one of their own as a little kid. And then obviously got chewed by Coacher a number of times through camp, and sort of humbled me and put me in my place. But it was deserved as well. So definitely appreciative of the opportunity and the learning that occurred there. But the camps, being around it, and then obviously watching the old coacher, stroll down the sidelines, arms crossed, barking a little bit at the refs, was something I gained a little bit of knowledge from too.
That's funny.
How about that? The early feel for coaching, both the stomping up and down the sidelines, but also that camaraderie and networking. And you picked up on that early. Is there a specific moment? Is it from camp? Is it from being around? Is it kind of all of that coming together, Randy?
I mean, I think a little bit of it's the camps, but if you look at today's society, I mean, it's, people just come together. Nobody really cared who was who, where they were from. It was just people wanted to have fun, get on the court, work on their game. And obviously different age groups, you have different mentalities, but as a young person, and my parents exposed me to that, I think, through sports. My parents were both educators. So I think that had a lot to do with things. But it was just a way that, different pieces of the puzzle fit. And I think that part was important to me to see that, different roles, played a part in success. It didn't always have to be the best player, but there were guys that would come in. Cesar Odio, went on to coach at Barry. He'd come in the game and it was just a defense chant, which how many guys get a defense chant when you get checked into the game, but that was what he was and what he brought to the table to help win.
All the pieces fitting together. I love it.
Isn't your dad in the Hall of Fame, the Florida high school basketball?
Yeah, he is in the Florida Association Basketball Coaches Hall of Fame, and then he's also at the Florida Southern Hall of Fame is that as well. And he probably give me a hard time because he's like, hey, I got in with less wins than you. What does that say? And he'd make sure I knew my place with it. But he's a big contributor to basketball here in Florida, bringing the Elite Eight to Lakeland, Sunshine State Tournament to Lakeland, and then the high school tournament was a big contributor to that. And then as well as the six-man club, it was the president of that and helped get that going back in the early 70s. Well, I guess mid to late 70s.
You talk about the 70s there. One of the things I do is I brag about, hey, I've coached at all levels, Division I, Division II, Division III in high school. But you look at your resume, you have been absolutely everywhere at every single level. We don't necessarily go chronologically on the podcast, but I think with you, we may have to. So after those camps, take us into your coaching track, Randy, and where did it all start?
I'd have to go back to the camps as much as we say, like, what happened afterwards. The big one for me was worked a lot of camps. Dr. Whistle said, if you want to get in, basketball or think you want to coach, go work camps, and that'll really be determinant if you love this thing or if you just like it. So I did that, but then Dale Brown, when I was working LSU camp, told all the camp staff, if you want to come in and meet with me, I'll give you an hour. As a young coach, I was probably 20 at the time, signed up to meet with him through his secretary, met with him, and through that just said, if you want to coach, here's the 3 people you need to call when you get back to Columbia, South Carolina, where I was going to college. And it was, George Glimpf, coach at Eau Claire, go on to coach in the pros, Tim Whipple at Irmo, and then Gary Fulmer was at Lower Richland at the time, now the AD at Richland 2 school district. But met with those 3, and then I got to choose basically who I wanted to work for because of that interaction, which normally does not occur, for someone, 20 years old, having someone put you in that position. So that was critical to my start to get in at a young age. I think having not played college basketball, to get that experience at Lower Richland High School and then Richland Northeast prior to my graduation. So that was critical. And then a little bit of AAU as well with the group from Hammond and LR.
What were some players? You talk about a little bit of AAU and some early high school days. Any names of players from that time that people might recognize or that you want to give a shout out to for affecting your career, helping you learn and become a better coach?
Well, I mean, there a lot of guys helped me become better coaches because I think obviously at that age, you just got to see the different levels of talent. early age, it was Jermaine O'Neal was at Eau Claire at the time. They called him 6'9", and he was obviously tremendous. Young player. Kevin Garnett was in South Carolina before he moved to Chicago.
Yep.
So got a chance to see him. B.J. Mackey, was at Irmo, and I've obviously gone on to great things at South Carolina and then into the coaching world. And so those guys are guys that really just I got to see the levels of talent. We had a quality team at Lower Richland. Got to play against Eau Claire. We beat Jermaine, and then and got BJ in the same week. But and that started to give me a reality of where we're at and how things can happen, even depending on your level of talent. But I'm thankful for Coach Gary Fulmer for the opportunity he gave me to get my feet wet and experience hands-on, where he allowed me to do coaching and continue to help groom me throughout that. That was big.
How about that? Good stuff. Yeah, it's the stories can go back, and those names that people recognize, and then a lot of other people who probably work their tail off that don't necessarily make it to the pros, but do still affect how you coach and who you are. Good stuff.
Well, and I think the other thing is, I'm still in contact with a lot of those guys, and it's just great to see, their success in life as young men, husbands. I guess they're not young anymore, but they're almost my age. And so getting up there, but at the same time, it's great to see their progression in life, their success and hard work has been instrumental too.
And one of them's calling you right now, it sounds like. So we got, so when you're doing that, name some other camps you worked. Obviously LSU helped you a lot, and Del.
Yeah. Early on, was back in the day pre-email. So it was, sending letters out, stamps and whatnot. And so it was, I probably sent out about 100 hoping to hear back from people, and ended up working at North Carolina, Georgia, LSU, Tennessee, Kentucky, Notre Dame, 5-star, and Florida Southern, Georgia. The first week of Georgia, I was I didn't know this. I thought I was working camp, but found out it was team camp, and I was a referee. So, so I got a full week of running, and had no idea what I was doing there as well.
And just one of your 5-star stories. I know you were on one of the calls this year. Kind of tell us a little bit about that. I thought that was pretty neat.
I mean, the 5-star experience was just incredible. I think for a young coach, again, Dr. Whistle was involved there, so he was helped me, and I think it goes back to relationships are critical, and letting people know what your goals are and what you're trying to do along the way, so people can assist where they can and pull you up. But I think it was the biggest 5-star story I think for me was they're going through, and Garf introduces everybody that's working the camp, and the whole camp's there, and he's going through, and he had a habit of boosting everybody, making them sound a little bit better. And he gets to me, and you got to stand up, and he's like, Randy Lee. And he goes, I don't even know who the hell he is. And he goes, how'd you get here? And I was like, Coach Whistle. And he's just like, well, he must be, effing good, because he's working camp, and I don't even know who the hell he is. And so I had to sit down, and, that week my campers, obviously kids that I picked in the draft, knew that, like, I'm a nobody. If Garf didn't know who I was, I didn't carry too much weight at the camp. So it was one of those where you just get perspective of where you're really at sometimes. And you just want to earn your keep, but it was a lot of lessons watching other coaches, great coaches there, Tom McCrory, Tim Maloney, and then being with a group of younger coaches. Josh Passner was working the camp, when he's, working at that time as young player and student of the game. So just learning and talking to people and gaining perspective of how they became successful as players and as coaches.
So did you earn your stripes? How'd that team that you drafted do with the no-name coach at that 5-star?
I think we did okay. It was, looking back, it's not really about I don't remember all the wins and losses in those events, but it's definitely just, it's more about, I think, the stations and those deals where, if you run your station correctly, getting kids to learn, work, it's the outdoor camp. You were, on the outdoor courts, and so it was hot, in Holmesdale, and there in Virginia, you're on the outdoors and trying to, figure it all out as well.
You say that now, though, but flashback, because I remember making the rounds in different camps, and I wanted to win every single one of those camp games I was coaching.
Oh, yeah.
And I've got perspective now. It really doesn't matter. Nobody cares. But in the moment, it sure did count.
Oh, I was an idiot. I got kicked out of because they had the ACC. Fred Barricat, I think, officiating, camp was in there. And so, I remember we were undefeated, and I thought we got hosed on a couple calls, and I got, kicked out of one of the games, like out of the gym. Like they made me leave the gym because I picked up 2, and I'm like, can't I just sit in the stands and watch my, no, you got the full toss. And it was one of those where you learn, like, okay, I just got to calm down a little bit,
Right.
But,
yeah, good perspective.
As a young kid, learning, you live and die by all your W's, even at camp.
Corey, have you changed over the years too? Are you still yelling and stomping, getting tossed, or you found the happy medium?
I've only been thrown out one time in my entire life.
Oh.
And I think my stories are well exaggerated. I think I'm a lot nicer than people like to say. Randy, tell us about, before we go on to all your coaching, okay, tell us about, I've heard they still have a warrant out for you for skipping some tolls or something.
Yeah. I'm hoping, I can't get brought in for any of these. Otherwise I'm in trouble, Corey. But, it was back in the day. I'll give you 2 quick camp stories. I think the one is you get your check at the end of the week, and back in those days, it's not always easiest to get cash or to get to the bank in time if you got it on a Friday, or if camp ended on a Saturday. So there's a few times going through mountains in West Virginia Turnpike, just did not have change or anything that I was willing to put into the toll system at the time. So just had to make sure I cruised on through there, and got a little bit short on gas as well. So I had to make sure found a place where you could get gas. Unlike these days where you put a card in before you could pump, you could sometimes pump gas before you paid back then. And so I did make use of that to get from point A to B. Where there's a will, there's a way. And I was going to find my way to the beaten path.
I like it. All right. Now start us. You work all your camps. You finally start getting a little more sturdy ground. Where's your first stop after graduation? Because you were coaching high school as an assistant in AAU and camps while in college. So
correct. So again, it goes back to communicating. Talked with Coach Gibbons, who at the time was at Florida Southern College, doing a great job with that program, and explained that I wanted to continue coaching. It was my passion, what I love to do, and he said he's going to talk to some people, and he called me and said, I've got a job for you. You're hired. And I was just like, where am I headed, Coach? And he was one that I would just follow and do what he instructed and told me to do at the time. And he said, you're going to Palm Beach Atlantic. I got you the job. You're going to be assistant coach. And so he's like, Coach Brent Wellman will call you. And Coach Wellman got in contact with me and told me that he wanted to bring me on staff as a young coach. And Coach Gibbons failed to mention that I was going to also be the head cross country coach for women and assistant sports information director.
Not the first time somebody's told a story like that, right?
Yeah.
Basketball, but
yeah, at some point you got to believe the people telling the story, not always the old coach on these. So got down there July 1st, shortly thereafter, and definitely got my feet wet in that first year at Palm Beach Atlantic, making the transition at the time, going from public schooling at the University of South Carolina to Christian college, and having to do some things there that definitely was not used to, going to chapel and things of that nature. And so got my feet wet recruiting and busy there as well.
Man, that's good stuff. So you leave there. Where is the next stop?
Yeah. Well, I think I was there for a short time. The one guy who I do want to give a thank you to is Terry Prim. I recruited Terry. Terry recruited us more than I recruited him early on. And Terry told me to watch a film, and for coaches, sometimes you got to watch the whole film. 'cause I watched the first half of the film, and I think Terry had 2 points, 1 rebound in the JUCO game from Henry Ford Community College, and I shut it off. And Terry called, "Coach, you watch my film?" And I'm like, "Terry, I watched the first half." He's like, "Coach, watch the full film." And the second half, he had 18 and 18 in the second half, and came alive, and called him back and told him, like, "Hey, we love to have you, Terry, but we got $1,500. And Terry ended up coming to school for $1,500 scholarship. Sorry, Terry, telling people, wow, we got you on the low. But Terry ended up being, one of the greatest players at Palm Beach Atlantic. But I think as a coach, sometimes you just have to continue to work it. Obviously, Corey, you've been in a situation where you've had success, maybe not do it the traditional way always, but you've found guys who fit your system and do well. And I think as coaches, we have to understand that there's players out there. You just have to find the right guys for what you're doing, and that believe in who and what you are.
And
talent or fit? If you have to choose one, do you choose fit or do you choose talent, Coach?
Man, I'm more of a talent, and then I got to figure out the fit. Because I think that's easier. Some guys I can't make talented, no matter what I do. Where talent, I think sometimes maybe I can fit or I can help them fit. So I'd always go with the talent. So I think that's critical.
So after Palm Beach, what was the next stop?
Palm Beach. I got out at Palm Beach and was in communication. I was working a 4 to 5 star camp that they had started. It was in down at the University of Miami's campus, and was working that with a former 5-star coach, Stan Jones. And while working the camp, obviously there's quite a bit of talent there. Back in those days with Silber and Robinson, some of the great Miami players, Haven Jackson. And then going through, we were talking, and Coach, I was telling him I'm looking to continue to get in coaching. And he's like, "Well, we're looking for a GA if you know anybody interested." And I'm like, "Coach, I want to be the GA." And it was, just a time and place situation that allowed me to really move into that position. I went down and interviewed with Coach Hamilton. I think it was probably about a week later. The shortest interview I've ever had, probably the most scared interview I ever had. Went down, met with Dr. Malios, the head of the sports management program. He has to see my transcript, which not really proud of my undergrad transcript. And he told me, he's like, "Looking at this transcript, you must be a hell of a coach." And so it's a little perspective on, what your grades really mean to you, going on, because I was putting my, faith in his hands. And then with Coach Hamilton, it was a 2-question interview. It was just, do you love basketball? And the second question was, you'll do whatever you're told to do. And then he got up and left. And that was it. And I looked at Coach Jones, and he's like, "We'll be in touch in a few days." And I was just bewildered, because I was like, thought there was going to be more to it. I was, was prepared for a lot more than just those 2 questions. But was fortunate to have the opportunity to work for Coach Hamilton. Man, I incredibly respect for his work ethic, recruiting, love for his players, and players' love for him as well. It's a 2-way street, and that year just gave me a lot of insight into what big-time basketball was, but also, even at that level, the relationships that are formed, the true caring for, the players, not only as student athletes, but as people, and the long-term relationships that were developed with Coach Hamilton and their staff members there. So that was
You're talking
huge.
about that after just 1 year, right, with Coach Hamilton, and you're able to take all of that away from that experience and watching him work and connect with the players, Randy?
Yeah, exactly. 1 year, and it probably took me a lot less. It was what he wanted for his players. The treatment of his players was just incredible from day one. He's a worker. Obviously, you see that with his recruiting efforts, success that they still have today at Florida State. But he was one who'd get into the office, and he was, we always talk about he's a bulldog. He's going to get after it, demand a lot. And I think he's one of the great CEOs out there for college basketball, of coaches who know how to, operate a program in its entirety in all phases. And he does a great job of surrounding himself with people that build him up. Coach Jones has been a part of that all but 1 year.
Tell us about Coach Jones, since you mentioned surrounding yourself with good people.
Oh yeah,
And Jones.
Coach Stan Jones. I mean, he's, I don't talk to him enough, and he reminds me when I fail to call him enough about it. But he's from days of Jackson Academy, winning state championships. He's a Memphis guy, but he just pours into kids. And Coach Jones has remained consistent from the early '90s, working 5-star to who he is now. He's the same guy, and I think for a lot of people that's critical. You see people shift and change depending on level or position, or where they're at on a staff. And Coach Jones has been consistent with that. And he's still a student of the game, still learning, but he's a relationship guy. You see it with his recruiting, and he pours into into the success of the program. But he also is a family guy and built on faith. And that's everything with Coach Hamilton. He's huge on faith. And I think that part was critical to see that you can, be successful. And the language, that was used in practice was one that, you could bring anybody to. We did it the right way and in a different way than a lot of people do.
Your time since then, you've dealt with Florida State some since then.
Oh yes. Try obviously try to stay involved with Coach Hamilton and Coach Jones. Know CY for a while as well through the Merrick East interactions. But Michael Ojo, one of my players at the global prep school I had, went on to go play for Florida State, and obviously followed that closely while he was there, and obviously in great hands with those guys, and did a tremendous job developing the big fella into a serviceable post that helped them succeed. But again, he's, people may look at stats, but he was a big part of their success in different ways as well, and epitomized, I think, what a seminal player is for them too.
And he just passed away, correct?
Yeah, he passed away last week while training over in Serbia. So, definitely a tough loss. He may be one of the best. No offense to anyone, but he may be one of the best humans, not just players, but humans that I've been around. Just positive, happy soul, always trying to make the best for other people's lives, giving back to others, going out of his way, taking pictures for countless people, and doing it with a smile. And so, that was, I know, extremely tough loss for Coach Jones, who poured a lot into him and individuals, and, Coach Hamilton, the rest of the Seminole community. His impact, I think, is global for what he did, not only in this country, but back home. And then also in Serbia, became a fan favorite. So it's tough. It's a tough loss.
You described that smile and that joy. For those of you watching the podcast here, go ahead and search Florida State basketball, Twitter or Instagram, and watch the little video montage they put together with the music and the smiles and that joy that you're talking about, and that human connection. And you can get that image in your head, just like you were describing, Randy.
Yeah, and I think the one, I don't mean to cut you off, Dana, I'm sorry. The one story, and I talked to Coach Baldwin about this, is when he first got to the States in January of his senior year, he needs a pair of shoes. So we gave him a size 18, the biggest shoe we had. I'm like, try this on, see if it fits. He put it on. I'm very thankful young man for, new pair of shoes. Never complained, never said a word, just thanks. And he's happy. So we gave him a second pair. And then we got down to Florida State for a visit. And during the visit, they're, measuring him. And they put his feet into this gel to measure his feet. And we messed up. Ojo, you got to put your feet straight down. And did again. And do it again, Ojo. And so they physically grabbed him, placed him in. And they were just shocked because they were, size 22 double E. And shoes that he wore. And Nike eventually had to make him a machine to make his shoes. But it's amazing that he not only played, practiced, wore it daily, the 18s when he's 22, double E, and didn't say a word. Just thankful. And, I know I don't have that in me to wear, maybe a half size too small at times. And, spoiled. But I think that's where sometimes international players and students and guys like Michael Ojo are just thankful for opportunity and the blessings that they have. And then obviously while I was at Florida State, he got to see, bigger and better than what we were able to provide for him at the prep.
That's a whole nother podcast. We end up with all these other themes, but do we coddle our players too much that they expect everything down to the T and to be cared for and given to rather than that gratitude? So it's a tough balance, and that's a really good example of somebody caring.
Most definitely.
Randy, you've had a lot of dealings with international players. I know we're cutting your path off here. We haven't left your grad school yet, but we're jumping around. But you've dealt with a lot of internationals, man, and that's probably why you're at Vanguard now. They made a heck of a hire, considering that's something they want to do. That was our free plug for you, Randy. But what?
I'll send you the money, Corey.
Talk some about that, because I know you worked some camps with Coach G over in Martinique, and you've done stuff on your own, but you've had a lot of ties in with international. Talk about that.
Yeah, I think part of my international journey goes back to when I was in high school. I had the opportunity to go to Russia in '89 when it was still communist, and through People to People organization, and spent 3 weeks there. And I think that really opened up my eyes to, I guess, the diversity, the love for basketball, but sometimes where we don't really get exposed to everything in international countries, or maybe the lack of opportunities for some. So I think that initially gave me my vision of what international basketball was through that trip and parts of it. And then working camp, Vladimir Bajnik was the individual I met working the LSU camp, and with Vladimir, he ended up sending a player to Palm Beach Atlantic when I got there. So I ended up recruiting an Australian and a Serbian in my first 2 weeks and Terry Prim. I got to claim Terry is during my first couple weeks at Palm Beach Atlantic, because Coach Wellman said, "Hey, you're going to recruit," and it's July 1st, and we're recruiting. So I went over to Palm Beach State, got David Kell, Australian, and then Vladimir had an extra Serbian at Central Florida Community College back at the time. He was with Gene Smithson, and ended up saying, "Hey, we can't take him. Can you take him?" And he put him on a train from Ocala to West Palm Beach, and was definitely excited to have him join us. But I think the internationals I thought it was a great market for me to initially get involved in, just because you could make contacts sometimes that were obscure, maybe people didn't know about prior to the internet being what it is, and then develop and get some talent to the States, and also help some young people experience some things that maybe they wouldn't normally have access to.
You call it he had an extra Serbian.
Yes. Yeah.
What do you mean by that? Didn't have a spot for him, so you were able to jump in there, send him on over.
Yeah, well, Vladimir, maybe too many stories, but Vladimir, when he was at Ocala with Coach Smithson, there's a limit on the number of internationals. So I think they probably brought in and figured out, who were the best,
right.
Players. And Vladimir, the kid he sent, Vlade Rashish, ended up coming to us, and then he ended up going to Armstrong Atlantic after a year or two at Palm Beach, and transferred up to D2 level. But Vlade was one who is always giving back to the guys, and he left the States and left money for kids, and left the Serbians actually a vehicle. And so some definitely guys who gave, to their players, and gave, trying to help people become better too.
To support them, right? Absolutely.
Definitely.
I've got to ask, Corey, before you move back to the stateside, that trip to Russia, you talk about 1989 USSR and things starting to change. You got a story, you got a player, you got a basketball moment that came out of that.
I don't know if there are any basketball moments. Most of the trip was just educational, but I think it was just that we were always taught that at that time it was Cold War. The hate. I expected to have hate from the Russians, and got there, and the Russians were just thankful for us being there, for sharing time. Took us into there's things that I can't believe we did. Obviously, we weren't as so happy as we are now. Like, we went into families' homes, for meals, just two kids and the family,
right.
The Russian family, and things that you would not do today. But it was just the love for Americans, the openness, the exchange of ideas. I think that part was critical, and that they were looking for hope. to become better. So I think, that part was interesting to see, because not the story that we always were told.
I love to hear that, Randy. Yep. Thanks for sharing that, man.
Thanks.
Good stuff. Good stuff. All right, get us back on the path. So we're bouncing all around. We finished up with Hamilton down. We get a master's degree out of it, or do we have to postpone that and get it later, or what?
It got postponed for a while. When I was there, Mike Jaskolski, one of the assistant coaches at Miami, was hired at Towson University, and so he was on staff for the Hurricanes and made the move up to Towson. And at the time, I think I was working USBL over in Bradenton, and I remember Coach Jazz giving me the call. I'm driving a van, got the call on the cell phone, and all of a sudden it's hey, I've got good news and bad news, and I'm like, Jazz, give me the good news. I'm a good news guy. And he's like, hey, I want to bring you on staff as a third assistant at Towson. I don't even think he told me third assistant, just I knew where I was at. And I was like, hey, I'm there. And he's like, I'll give you the bad news. I'm like, whatever. Just, there is no bad news now. And he's just like, you're not going to get paid. And I was just like, all right, Jazz, I'll figure it out. And so it was my parents were actually like traveling in that area, in that region. They went down, found me a place to stay within the next like 4 or 5 days. Stayed in, rented a room from this older couple. That was $250 a month, probably the best rental deal ever in Baltimore. And lived in that, and made the move. And Jazz, buy me meals and beverages here and there, and we'd just learn to be Division I coach at a tremendously young age. Very appreciative of opportunity, and I think the big part for me was Jazz. During my time at Miami, I spent a lot of time with Coach Jazz. In the film room, I did a lot of film breakdown work back then, and spent a lot of time with him just on what he was looking for, aspects of details, but also tried to get well versed so I could work in the weight room and do strength training for guys, because I knew at the lower levels that that's needed to wear multiple hats. So I think that was a big part for me to be a part of Jazz and to be his eyes and ears as a young guy.
How was that Towson experience? And I asked that with a certain perspective, as I took a very similar role to yours a couple, 3 years later, and they actually paid the third assistant. It was minimal, but there was a small salary.
Yeah.
2001, I think that was. So,
yep. Towson was great for me. I remember we opened up with Michigan. It was our first game with Coach Jazz. They had, tractor trailer, and those guys, Bullock, and coming into the house, Maceo Baston, and talented group. And so I think, it was eye-opening, but it was a lot of fun. A lot of development we had. We had a great group of seniors, tried to turn the program. Jazz did a great job with his defense. But overall, I enjoyed my Towson experience. The second year, turned down working at another institution at a lower level for a paid spot to continue to work at Towson, and then the money got bumped a little bit my second year. Not a lot, but there was a slight bump and increase, and then from there, had the opportunity to move from there. So I'm thankful for Jazz, relationship, friendship with him still. But it's one of those where, I think at that time learned a little bit administration, the role of admin, leadership plays in the greater success of athletics. So sometimes earlier on in the process, it was all, I looked at the head coach, what they were doing, and then at Towson started to get the understanding of, leadership from the top, how it affected, coaches, head coaches, and admissions decisions, things of that nature.
Right.
Which I
Both
think
in the athletic department with an athletic director and at the president level in some places, right? At a college.
Most definitely.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that part was critical to learn at Towson, but also to get more, hands-on coaching and experience there with the staff and, the guys on staff there, Coach J. Dull and Tony Shields, were great guys to work with. and obviously helped carry me as a young coach, and teach me as well.
And those people are key on any staff. When you're the young guy coming in, Rob Senderoff, Dino Presley were a couple guys on that Towson staff when I was there teaching me how things were done, or Phil Cunningham at Georgia State.
Yep.
You need those people that are mentoring you. You're right.
Most definitely.
Oh, and Corey Baldwin, of course. Everything I know, I learned from Corey Baldwin. Somewhere in Morrow, at the Dairy Queen.
Randy, now you leave Townsend. What was the next stop?
Next stop was Delaware State. Again, the head coach that got named there was Tony Shields, who was on staff at Towson. Tony was a top assistant, got named at Delaware State, so made the move. And again, it was a little bit of economic situation. It wasn't a situation making the move just strictly because let me get out of Towson. We got a significant bump in pay to a full-time level, and had a great relationship with Coach Shields. He's a Lakeland guy as well. Coach Kathleen knew in the past, so transitioned with him up to Delaware State, and started to try to rebuild that program as well.
Man, that's awesome. It's a big deal. So you're connected almost everywhere you go, it seems. So
yeah. Well, I think that's the big part is guys have to young guys and us, we sometimes, forget that, the guy next to you may be the guy helping you out. A lot of times I think we look outside of, making the calls elsewhere, talking to everybody else, but sometimes we fail to realize that the guy next to you may be making the big move. They can assist you rather than, looking internally rather than externally all the time.
It's good stuff right there. So what happens after that?
Coach Shields resigned at Delaware State after that year. I was interim for a short period of time until they named the head coach. Was out of the business for a brief time, a couple weeks, and I think that's when you start to get a young coach. Where am I going to be? A couple calls were made, and Coach Kevin Johnson down at Centenary College in Shreveport, Louisiana, had a position open on staff. So I went down to Shreveport and, made the move there to work for KJ. At the time, we were independent Division I. It's now a Division III school, but we were independent D1 and learn the battles that are faced to being independent, and scheduling-wise was learned what guarantee games were quickly.
Oh man, so I imagine playing there, all guarantee games or most guarantee games, probably got a lot of good officiating stories, I'm sure.
I don't know about good. Good and officiating always don't go hand in hand. It's just one consistent. So it was just Joe Johnson, comes to mind at Arkansas, playing at Marquette, Iowa. We took some Creighton. There's some thumps. On the road a little bit during that time. But it was one that, again, thankful for the experience looking back. But it just, sometimes you're in tough situations as a coach, based upon, being an independent, you're not going to the tournament as an independent for the most part. And, just some of the struggles in small time athletics and small time D1.
Yeah, hard to recruit there when you're not going to the tournament. You don't have a conference tournament, any of that stuff.
Yeah, correct. And I think sometimes it's finding, going back to your roots. I think the one success, we had, it's a home of Chief, Robert Parrish. Ronnie McCullum was a very talented player, led the country in scoring, during the year I was there. And then we sat out Andrew Wisniewski. The Wiz was at Staten Island. He was a 3-2 guy as a freshman at St. Peter's. And he was a kid that I remember from 5-star. And sometimes as players, if there's guys listening or coaches want to relay it, he was a kid that I remembered at 5-star, just being at, Station 13, out working people. And he's a little fella. But he came, coach said, hey, we need a walk-on. We need to find a guy. And he was a young man that turned down D2 scholarships to be a walk-on for a year. Ended up being Louisiana College Player of the Year when he was a senior. And so we when turn that into a pro career. But sometimes it's finding guys that, again, a little bit of talent, but fit, and people to believe in them. So I think those parts are critical as well. Yeah.
All right. Hey, just for those who don't know, what is Station 13 at 5-star?
Station 13 is above and beyond. So it's doing more than the typical um, camper, and it's, extra work. And, so sometimes you see Station 13's what really makes, champion player, the winners, guys who go do the extra, whatever's needed, especially when you're tired. And they're not taking it easy on you either during Station 13. And guys who show up every day are recognized by Garf and those guys as well.
Above and beyond. I love it.
All right, so let's get back off of Station 13 and let's go to your hustle and your work now. So you leave Centenary. Where are we going now?
Centenary made the long move to Orono, Maine, and so made the move to the Black Bears with Dr. John Giannini. So during that time, after I was leaving Centenary, I wanted to get back into conference and understand the importance of winning, and trying to, obviously, as a young coach, put some winning on the resume rather than just be coaching. And so had a relationship with Dr. Giannini from my time at Towson, being in the Merrick East at the time. And he had an opening on staff with the coach just leaving to go elsewhere. So made the drive up and move up to Orono, Maine. Great opportunity to be a part of the UMaine family and the Black Bears, and learn from Dr. Giannini, who I think is one of the great offensive minds, and did some great things with the talent that he had there, in particular recruiting transfers.
I'd love to hear a little bit more about that, because we've all been to many clinics and heard lots of coaches speak, but Giannini is one of the ones that stuck in my brain. He talked about running and how your practices are organized in a way, because that's going to be your style of play, and you got to go the whole time. And that was years back. So a great offensive mind is your words. How and why?
I think he built, his talent to his foundation to his talent, and vice versa, where he brought in guys who fit what he wanted. He had guys like Nate Fox, who was like a throw-in from, Boston College, and Andy Bedard, who's a, Mainer that went away to Boston College, came back and led them to success. Transfers, Julian Dunkley, a number of guys from, the South, junior college basketball came up, and it was just a collection of guys. Huggy Dye was a great talent up there. But the group, and then Justin Rao, nicknamed Footer, they pulled in from Clearwater Christian College, all the way up there, and went on to go be a pro, and was one of the top shot blockers in the country. But he emphasized style of play. I think sports psychology, what he wanted from the guys. Unlike Coach Hamilton and Coach Jazz, we did not work on defense much. We were, it was, we're going to teach defense while we're playing offense. And it was a different, style, obviously, than I was used to working for other coaches, because we were offensive minded, offensive focused, and scoring points, and then making sure people stopped us rather than working on how we were going to stop people. We figured just guard your yard was a big mantra for us, and had a great run that year, going to the AE's final, losing it on the roof, at BU. But they're in great league, Speedy Claxton, the Norm Richardson during those years at Towson and Maine, and some great talent within that league.
So now, Randy, you've just me looking at it, for those of you who are keeping score at home. We've been high school, AAU camps, NAIA assistant, D1GA, volunteer Division I assistant, in a full staff member. Even though you're a volunteer, you were recruiting and all that. Independent, HBCU, Division I assistant, right? Or no? Delaware State, wasn't that that's HBCU?
Yep, HBCU.
And then an independent Division I assistant. So now all of that work, because I think some guys just don't realize. They think they work a couple of camps and they didn't get the job they want. Wasn't meant for me. You just did all of that to get to your first real probably concrete Division I assistant job. Would you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I mean, to me, I look at them all as concrete. Because if I have a job and somebody's looking at me as I'm an assistant, I got to act and take it as concrete. Probably my most concrete pay wise was Delaware State.
Really?
Yeah, was for at that time was my best paying job, most stable in terms of financially was Delaware State. And then the others were situations I could survive and advance in, but it was all a hustle. And having to invest in myself long term, what I want to do. And the reality is, I mean, I'm a nobody. In terms of I hadn't played college basketball, my last name doesn't get me indoors, and it was one where I just wanted to advance and survive more than anything. And so, and working for opportunity at Maine was great. I was finishing my master's online through VCU, and Coach Giannini, the doctor, said something he probably doesn't even remember, but he made a comment that was truthful, but it was one of those eye-opening where he said, we were at lunch as a staff, and he's like, hey, we're gonna have a preseason, we're gonna have a great year, and if things happen like they should, opportunities will present themselves, and just want to let you guys know I may take everybody, or I may not take anybody to the next stop, and that was truthful. It was eye-opening. It was reality is that, wow, just because we have success doesn't mean I'm guaranteed anything. And at that time, it was prior to our season, I knew I wanted to go on a different course because I'd chased the Division One, and I think the mentality coaches should have doesn't matter what level you're at, that I am D1. Have the elite mentality, whether you're a high school coach, AAU, JUCO, NAI, whatever the case may be, have the D1 mentality, work ethic, that you're at that level, you can be at that level. But I wanted to do something different with my life rather than just continue to chase. So I made the decision prior to the start of the year that I was going to do something different. The doctor we had a great year, had another great year after I left. And when he went to LaSalle, he hired a staff that was successful for him, but they were Philly, New Jersey guys. The one assistant got bumped up at Maine, but then it was not everybody transitioned. So it's learned part of the reality of what the business is as well through that experience.
A harsh reality, right? Because you put in your time and you think there's that connection that'll last forever, but it's the right business decision too. And you've got to hire the Jersey Philly guys and in
Right.
the doctor's case. Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, and it's one where it's a business. You have to do what's best for you long term, particularly with the salaries, families, responsibilities, children. So it's one of those where I think that part is critical, and not knocking Dr. Giannini. Highly respect him as a person and as a coach, but it's one of those where that became a game changer for me with what I want to do. I want to have a little bit more control of my future, my life, and to try to limit the amount of moves and do them on my terms.
All right. So where does that take us next? You leave.
I didn't move very far. I went to Orono High School, so I became the head high school coach there at Orono High School in Orono, Maine. And took over a program that hadn't had much success previously, but had a winning history, and took them to the playoffs in our first year. And during that year, had the opportunity. It's all about relationships and meeting people. I got snowed in one day when I was at University of Maine, and I was a Florida guy. I don't know what to do when I'm snowed in. Can't move the vehicle, so I walked across the street in the snow, and my neighbor was Sean Casey, previous head coach at the University of Maine Machias, and sat there, and he's like, "Who's your plow guy?" I'm like, "My what?" He's like, "Your plow guy. Who's your plow guy?" I'm like, "I don't even know what a plow guy is." And he's like, you got to have a plow guy to get, knock the snow out of your yard and get you out. And so, that interaction, we sat there, talked for a couple hours, and before the plow guy came, knocked it out, I could get to work. But during that course of the communication, Sean told me about his experience at the University of Maine Machias, what a great place it was, his success there. And after my time at Orono High School, that position became open, and then led for me applying to that position.
So you get to Maine Machias. So now you've been all these assistants. So now you've been a head coach of high school, now Maine Machias. How long were you at Maine Machias? I know you wore a lot of hats there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we'll start speeding it up a little bit because now you get some more head coaching jobs.
At Maine Machias, it was interesting. The day I was supposed to interview for the head job, the president, I'm down in Machias, spent the night at a little hotel there, motel, and I'm getting ready to go interview. They've got graduation that I'm supposed to interview. Well, the president died at graduation. So obviously, my interview does not happen that day. I have to go back home.
Wow.
And
wow,
then,
that's right. Oh my gosh.
so it's one of those where, eventually get the job, go back, apply, interview in person, get the job. I was head cross country coach, head basketball coach, taught an intramural director, for, a lot of jobs, but not a lot of money, but, loved my time at, Machias, Clippers. We were non-scholarship NAI. And again, you start to learn how you can be successful. There were Canadian rates for tuition. And again, going back to, you got to find a way with where you're at to have success. The program had not been in good shape winning wise. I like taking terrible jobs and making them great jobs.
Okay.
I think it's low expectations, high rewards if you get it turned around. But you got to take a job where you can win. And they had success there previously, so that was part of my lure to the job. But I was able to bring in some talent. Bai Handy was a Dell State walk-on for me that ended up coming in his 5th year back to me. And he became an All-American, but he had a long road to get to Machias. Frank Martin sent me 2 players. One was a player who signed at Cincinnati out of high school, but had some, bumps in the road in life. And Frank called and said, "Hey, can you take somebody?" I'm like, "Frank, if he's one of yours, I'll take him." And then Frank mentioned the young man's name, and I was like, "I'll definitely take that player." And the catch was take his brother, who ended up going to play for Jay Gibbons. Was at Savannah State eventually as well. And so it's again relationships, but it was an interesting dynamic being non-scholarship, hustling. We played Winthrop, and that was part of my deal. I wanted to play as many people as we could. We crossed the border, played the Canadian teams as well, which is quite interesting, playing the international rules. But that was, I think, critical. And then the other interesting experience at Machias was probably about December of my first year there. I called into a meeting with the AD and the women's basketball coach. And anytime you get called into a meeting with the AD, middle of the day, unannounced, that you get a little worried. And the women's coach informed me that he got called to active duty. He was reserves. Got called to active duty to I believe Iraq at the time. And they said, we need to, we got to get a women's basketball coach. And I was like, hell, I guess we do. And they're like, well, we already got him. And I was just like, who? And they're like, you. And so for the next year and a half, I ran the women's team as well. And so we had double headers. And again, you learn different things and coaching women. The first day of practice, I'm a big, runner. If you miss layups, turn it over, you're going to do some sort of exercise discipline. Well, the first day of girls practice, I was just clapping it up, hey, great energy, let's go. And 2 of the captains came over and said, we want the same exact treatment as the guys. And I was just like, I'm not sure you guys want that. And, the girls are like, oh, we definitely want that. And so, it's the girls' experience was good. We had success, but I had some great young ladies that taught me a lot about coaching women's basketball and that dynamic. We got to recruit some student athletes as well on that side. So it was definitely an interesting time, giving halftime talks and pregame at the, back to back for both teams.
And practices too. You spent a lot of time on the court, and we hear the term, East Coast guys. So let's put this in perspective where Machias is. Machias is at the very top of the East Coast. And you mentioned Canada,
Yep.
on the border, basically. And you've been down at University of Miami at the very other end. So you got East Coast covered like nobody's business.
Yeah.
But we're not done. Okay.
Yeah.
So now we've done all of Maine. Okay.
But Corey, I
Where we go next from Maine?
got to interrupt you for a second because Machias is like the easternmost university in the U.S. But the other thing is, just to give people perspective, and I think a lot of times young coaches say, "Oh, I'll do anything to coach." Like Machias was 45 minutes to Walmart. We were 45 minutes to a stoplight, like a red stoplight, not a blinking light, red stoplight. The best pizza in town was the mobile gas station pizza. Was the best pizza in town. Hour to movie, hour and a half to the mall. So it's when guys say, "Oh, I'll go anywhere." Let's see if you'll go anywhere. And but we did have lobster fresh off the boat, which is priceless. When you get fresh lobster.
All right, so you go from lobster to some Texas chili. Is that how it goes? That way?
Little Tex-Mex.
Yeah. All right, so where'd you go next? Give it to us.
Yeah. So after my 2 years, had some success at Machias with the programs there. There was an opening at University of Texas Permian Basin, and it was a intramural assistant director and head basketball coach. And sort of with my experience having worked, done intramurals, and it was a scholarship program in the ID1. And Machias were D2, but we were non-scholarship. I was like, let me apply for this, and had the opportunity to went and interviewed in July, landed the position, and then began to teach and coach out there. We were probably the last tartan court I think in the country during the time, the old rubber court. So when we got out there, we had the rubber court, and they're like, "Oh, we're going to build a convocation center," and I was like, "Okay." And after my first year, we got news that we got the convocation center, but convocation center became a more of a fine arts center. So there was no court included. So sometimes the harsh reality is you have to figure things out. We raised some money to purchase a court. I know Ryan Marks may be listening. His players would always come into our gym and ask where the real court is. And I'm like, this is the real court. This is where you guys play. But they were just amazed that we had an upstairs wooden practice court, but our main court was a good old tartan.
Tartan, it's like Oglethorpe in Atlanta just recently. It's D3, but they just recently made that switch.
Yeah, it's amazing looking back to those things. And we were NAI D1, and then we transitioned to NCAA D2 during my time out there. Rough transition, and we had great success my first year. We had some great players that were there. Marlo and Marcus Saunders, some other players that were tremendous players, and then brought two of my Canadians with me from Maine, and then also brought an English player that helped us have success that year. Won 20+ games, and I think sometimes it's again a program that needed an uplift. Tried to provide that, but then with the transition to D2, I think sometimes as coaches, we look at those things where it's like a great opportunity. And for me, it was a great opportunity to be a D2, transition to D2. But in retrospect, it's tough because you're making the transition where you have no playoffs for several years. And most individuals do not want to be a part of a team that can't go to the playoffs. So sometimes coaches, be careful what you wish for, because I think that part was tough for me. We didn't win as much as I would have liked looking back. And partly just because I think it was tough situation recruiting wise, and to get what I wanted to get player wise long term.
All right, Randy. So now you've gotten a piece of Texas, and now you're going to try to get us back to the Southeast. So,
Yeah.
So where's next?
The next stop happened, I think, by faith and by God. My mother-in-law was visiting and out in Texas, and she like asked how do you get a job, and they're not athletic on that side of the family as far as their ties. And so I'm like, oh, here's how you do it. You go in, do a search, and all of a sudden the only job available in January was Tennessee Temple, and I was like, oh, here's what I would look for, da da da, and I stumble upon the AD at Tennessee Temple, John Secord, and John used to be the compliance director at Towson. And so all of a sudden I called John. I'm like, is this John Secord? Johnny Law, as we used to call him at Towson. And he's just like, yeah. I'm like, I want this job. And he's like, you don't want this job. He's like, it's a bad job. And I'm like, I want to make the move because my stepdaughters were living in Atlanta, and my wife was commuting, once a month back and forth to see the girls. And at that time, as you probably see, most of my career, all my career had been about me. And I wanted to make the decision then to help out, my wife, but also help out the stepdaughters and build that relationship so I could be a part of their life. And prior to that, they were in Vermont when we were in Maine. But once we had the split, became tougher. So I took the job in Chattanooga, Tennessee Temple, a small Christian college. We're in the NCAA, and then transitioned back to the Southeast from Texas. So basketball-wise, not a good move for my career. If looking back, leaving D2 to go to NCAA, but for family, for my life, me personally, it was a great move. So I think sometimes you got to balance the two.
I like it. Plus, you had the prep school.
Yeah.
Ran there, and a lot of people don't realize this. I know one time, Cyril, you'll like this. We're talking to Coach Hebbs, and he was talking about Temple being in a rough part of the, being in the rough city. And I was so small time, I thought he was talking about Tennessee Temple. And he was talking about Temple in Philadelphia.
Really?
But being honest now, and I'm not, Tennessee Temple is in a very rough part of Chattanooga. Am I right, Randy? Tell them. I mean,
yeah, there were some tough times, and I mean, I could go on for Tennessee Temple. I mean, there was they had a lockdown, so at night I went to go visit a player and just talk to him, and I'm talking to him, and it was past 11 o'clock, and I'm trying to leave to go back home, and I get to the dorm door, and I push on it, it's locked, and I'm like, I push again, it's locked, and I'm like, I can't get out of the dorm, so I have to call security to open up the door so I can actually physically go home. So like our guys were, Tennessee Temple was a secure place, both inside and outside. As far as once you were in the dorms, you were not getting out past curfew. But it was it's a tough place, definitely a tough place. A little bit inner city Chattanooga, but at the same time, it was a place where grew a lot in different areas, particulars of family. We grew, and thankful for that opportunity to be a part of that. We had some great kids there, and receptive to internationals, and then obviously allowed me the opportunity to do the prep school, which big for me for helping other people and create a pathway for people to get back to college.
All right, your path's almost done, but we have a couple of 6 degrees of separation. That's where Justin Newton played his basketball at. That was later an assistant for me.
Yep.
Big time head coach, bigger than all of us here, right? And then you helped a couple of my guys. Desmond Hall went and played for you. Had a good career up there with you. But it's always neat to see how everything ties together. So now you leave Tennessee Temple. All right, we're right near the end. Randy, we're gonna put you on the shot clock here. You got about 3 minutes to give us where everything went after Tennessee Temple, and then we'll do the lightning round. So give us.
All right. So following Tennessee Temple, took the job at Lake Wales High School. Was there 3 years. Had following Coach Billy D, their state championship team, Elite Eight back-to-back years. 3rd year, just bumping the road. Disagreement with admin, and I'm hard-headed. I'm going to do things that I think are best for the kids and people, and I did something, and we had a split. And from there, was fortunate enough to go to Southeastern University, where I worked for R.J. Barsh, who's the head coach. Now he's a assistant coach at Boise State. So great opportunity there. Thankful for my time with the Fire. From there, Kevin Lubbers was hired as a head coach after RJ left. Went and worked for Brandon Giles at Polk State, and then transitioned back to Southeastern where I'm currently working, and then also into the Vanguard job where coaching as well.
So you're about 92 years old based on all this path and stops.
I may look like it, Earl, but I still got some tread on the wheels here.
Yeah.
Man, so that's a lot of movement everywhere. As we said, down the East Coast, a little bit of Texas, a little bit of Tennessee, high school, prep school, post-grad, boarding schools, D1, D2, NAI, NCC, AA, assistants, HBCUs, independents. We've got it all. So,
and then I'm back home now.
Right.
So little everything.
So let's get one last question before we go into the lightning round, unless Searle wants to piggyback or do some more. But I'm just curious, with all the travel, with all the levels, what's the biggest similarity in all of them? Like, what's the one thing that you might say that's pretty much the same no matter where I've been? What would you say? I know it might be a tough one, but what would you say?
I mean, I think the big thing is, finding your identity as a coach, is the most important thing. But I think there's talent everywhere. I think sometimes people fail to realize that, when we were at Maine Machias, we had talent. We had guys that go play pro at non-scholarship NAI D2. When I'm at, Tennessee Temple, we have John Reek, who was, a former Mississippi State, basketball player that was in the NBA draft, at one point. So I think there's kids and players at every level, and I think it's a lot about finding talent that fits your system and your program.
Good stuff.
Mm-hmm. Time for some quick hitters now, Corey.
All right, Cyril, you started. I'm gonna let you be the lead.
Thanks, but then I'll steal yours. You always go with the food, and you can follow up on this one. But best place, Randy, that you enjoyed eating in Towson or Baltimore?
Oh man, I would just give you my two quick favorites. There were Bill Bateman's and CVP.
There you go. Great spots and great seafood up that way too. Some good shrimp down in the harbor.
What was your favorite, Cyril, while you were there in town?
We mentioned those places you take recruits. Towson Diner was always a spot, but Bill Bateman's there. Good spot. Good places.
Little Italy's great as well. I mean, you can go on. I mean, can't go wrong.
It's true. So much good food up that way.
Love it. I love it. All right, Randy, I'll stick with food. All right, you've been a Florida guy for so long. What's your favorite spot? Lakeland, Tampa area.
I mean, Columbia Restaurant, if we're going high end, over in, Tampa. If we're going local, I mean, I'd probably go with just Fred's Market, some good Southern food, buffet, can't go wrong. When you're there, there's a little bit for everybody.
I like it.
Let's keep it in Florida. We need a couple of names here. We'll keep you on the witness protection program, but so much of these stories we've heard is the Florida Hoops Mafia. Who is the head? Who is the lead? Who's the biggest name in the Florida Hoops Mafia here that's got this whole network going that gets you guys out all over the country?
I mean, I think the Gordon Gibbons is definitely the head. I mean, he's a guy he's the connector to so many people. He's Mr. Relationships, and knows everybody. I think, guys like Gordon Gibbons, I mean, I'd have to go like Jim Haley, who's passed away, but, Coach Haley was a big guy, Coach Kirshner, who formed FABC, and then you got guys in South Florida. It's such a big state, like Pleen, Alvarez, the guys at Miami Christian, Miami Prep now. But it's just, Frank Martin, all those guys, it's just a big family, and guys looking to take care of each other. And, obviously Coach Ham and that staff as well at Florida State. Be remiss not mentioning them.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. All right, with all these different coaches you worked for, who's the one that maybe you feel like you stole the most on the court from, and who's the one you stole the most maybe off the court?
I mean, off the court, I mean, if I'd want to make sure it's, Coach Hamilton. because I think it's the longevity of what he's done. But I think also some of the entrepreneurial spirit is he exhibited as well. He does a lot of things off the court, outside of basketball, in the entrepreneurial world and investing and helping others. I want to try to emulate him as much as possible. But from a basketball standpoint, and probably a lot from Kevin Johnson at Centenary, which a lot of people may not look at. He and Gene Eni would probably be my two offensive guys. But then defensively, probably go back to Gordon. Just things I'm long-term rooted in, knowing that they're successful.
You mentioned the good doctor. You mentioned the coacher. Offense or defense, Randy? If you're picking and emphasizing one, which is your push?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. The other day, one of my new players asked me, hey, coach, what are we going to do? What kind of style of play? And I just said, we're going to play a winning style of play. So, I need to see what we have before I can answer that question. There's some kids I've coached that, struggle scoring it. But I think in today's world, you got to be offensive. And I know it's against, Corey over there. I know his team's going to take charges all day if we're playing them. But I think for recruiting, for me, is able to, get kids that, are better offensively and then try to teach them to be Corey's Bulldogs and, have the swamp foxes everywhere.
Swamp fox.
All right, I've got one for you, Randy. With all those travels, you're going to give some good ones, I know. I ask almost every time. Worst gym you've coached in or played in, best crowd you've coached against or played against?
Oh, man. I mean, I'd probably say UNLV or Louisville for best crowds. Again, it goes back to the Miami days, but those were just electric, atmospheres, and then the worst gym, I mean, I can name a bunch of Canadian gyms, won some games that you couldn't step out of bounds, and you hit the wall. And so, throw-ins were, from the court itself. So it's I would go with a couple of the old Canadian gyms. And if anybody's looking for some W's, I've got some schools up in Canada that people can call me on. I'll hook you up.
Hey, the level of Canadian basketball continues to climb, but it's good to know you can find a few W's there.
Yeah.
All right, Randy, as we come to a close here, let's stay international for a moment. Players that you have coached, is there a favorite country or source of players? Is there what's an international stop or an international player that you can highlight for us that sticks in your mind?
I mean, I don't know if there's just one. I mean, I think it would do others injustice. So I don't know if I can just name one. Probably the country I've dealt with the most is Serbia. Mm-hmm. Just long-lasting relationships with players, and players continue to help players in that country. I think more so than others. My Australians have been funny. Those are probably the funniest guys I've ever been around are the Aussies. But I think I go back to Serbia, and then the Africans I've had, Cameroon, Sudan, Nigeria are just thankful. So I think they're just different mixes, but I do love the fact that coaching them, they all want to go play pro, and I think that's been beneficial as well. They look beyond the 4-year career that they want to continue to invest, so they're continuing to try to improve their game no matter what level they're at or where they're at on the bench as well. If they're not playing, they're continuing to try to get better.
How about that? Yeah, that's good perspective there. And you don't want to leave anybody out. So that's a lot of countries and connections that you've had over the years. So Randy, at the end of each of these podcasts, anything you'd like to share that we haven't talked about, or people you'd like to give a shout out to, wrap things up for us here?
I mean, the big thing is, just obviously, I think everybody's story is going to be different. You guys do a great job covering, off the beaten path, and some of us are beyond even the beaten path. So I think it's one of those where people have got to find their own identity, what they want to do, what makes them happy. And I think as coaches, sometimes we chase levels. I'd encourage people to chase happiness, and find happiness where you're at, because I think too oftentimes we live our lives like, oh, I'm D1, or, well, there's people D1 and miserable. It's fun. Go find happiness, what works for you, and create something that you're going to be long-term happy with in your family, is going to be happy with. Everything else, I think life is short. Enjoy it, but also find ways you can impact people rather than just be part of something that you're not really impacting as well.
Mhm. Good insight right there, huh, Corey?
I like it. I like it.
Got to give shout out to my man Tom Judd too.
Tom Judd, Towson,
1,000.
a good influence on all of us.
Yes, most definitely. Put smiles on faces, definitely.
Big time.
Yeah.
That helped. Yeah, when you talk about the grind of Division I, especially, but coaching in general, you got to have those people at your stops that are going to keep it happy, keep it smiling, and,
Yep.
and find the entertainment.
They're with you, win or lose, and gonna keep you in good spirits.
Spirits, exactly.
Yes.
All right. Well, listen, everybody, thanks for watching and being a part of our podcast here with Coach Randy Lee. Follow us on the social media platforms, Off Beaten Path Podcast on Instagram, also some Twitter action, Off Beaten Path with a little underscore. So thanks for listening to Off the Beaten Path, our podcast for hoop and life.
And it's a show for those who want to coach, those who used to coach, those who are still coaching, those who follow coaches, and those who hire and fire the coaches. Make sure you mask up while you're out there.
Mask up.